The funeral was too quiet. The kind of silence that presses against your chest until breathing feels like a betrayal. Rain slicked the gravestones, and the few mourners huddled beneath black umbrellas whispered their condolences as if afraid to disturb the dead. I stood at the edge of my twin sister Stella's grave, staring at the white coffin that was supposed to hold her body. My hands were numb, my throat raw from holding back sobs. That was when my phone buzzed. On the rain-blurred screen, an unknown number glared at me with 4 words that froze my blood. "I'm alive. That's not me in the casket." My heart stopped. My fingers shook as I typed back, "Who are you?" The reply came almost instantly. "Can't say. They're watching. Don't trust our parents." And in that moment, grief turned to terror. I wasn't supposed to survive childhood without Stella. That's what I used to tell myself whenever I thought back to those early years. We were born together, 2 tiny cries in a crumbling Michigan hospital, and from the very beginning it felt like the world was against us. Our parents weren't monsters in the obvious way. No fists, no bruises that outsiders could see, but neglect leaves its own scars. My father was a plumber who came home reeking of beer most nights, muttering about how life had cheated him. My mother, exhausted from endless cashier shifts, always seemed on the edge of breaking, snapping at us for asking simple questions, for needing anything at all. To them, Stella and I were not children to cherish, but extra mouths that turned every bill into a burden. So we turned to each other. I was the louder one, the shield. Stella was quieter, sharper, and endlessly hopeful. When our parents screamed late at night, shards of glass hitting the floor, muffled curses rattling the walls, we would crawl under the same blanket and I would whisper silly stories about running away to someplace warm. Stella would giggle through her tears, and in that sound, I found the strength to keep pretending things might get better. Meals were inconsistent, mostly peanut butter sandwiches we learned to make ourselves by age 6. On school mornings, we held hands walking past boarded-up houses and cracked sidewalks, daring each other not to flinch when older kids tried to shove us around. Stella was the dreamer. She carried library books like lifelines, whispering facts about worlds far away. Paris, New York, the oceans we had never seen. I carried tools, fixing rusty bikes for neighbors, trading scraped knuckles for a few dollars. One Christmas Eve stays burned in my memory. We were 8, and there were no gifts under the crooked fake tree. Only a handful of stale candies our mother tossed there without looking. Stella stared at the emptiness, her blue eyes glistening. "Did Santa forget us?" she whispered. I bit down hard on my lip, forcing a smile. "No way, he's just late." That night, I crept outside, gathered smooth stones by the river, and scratched clumsy designs onto them with colored pencils. In the morning, I handed them to Stella. Her face lit up like the sun breaking through storm clouds. "You're the best sister in the world," she said, hugging me so tight, I couldn't breathe. Moments like that were oxygen. By 12, we were working odd jobs. I babysat the neighbors' kids. Stella tutored classmates for pocket change. We hid the money in a rusty tin box beneath our bed, terrified our parents would sniff it out. Half of it went to school supplies, the other half to ice cream on hot summer days. Looking back now, I realize those small victories, peanut butter sandwiches, river stones painted like jewels, secret ice cream runs were more than survival. They were promises. Promises that no matter how broken the world around us became, Stella and I would never let each other fall. By the time Stella and I turned 18, the world was already tugging us in different directions. She had always been the star, the one who turned borrowed library books into test scores that impressed even the most jaded teachers. I was proud of her, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel the shadow of comparison. Stella was destined for something bigger, something brighter. I was simply trying to survive. The letter came in autumn, when the trees in our neighborhood burned with color that made the cracked sidewalks look almost beautiful. Stella opened the envelope with trembling hands, and when she read the word, "Congratulations," she screamed, startling the whole house. She had been accepted into a university in Boston, full scholarship. I hugged her so tight she laughed through her tears, but inside me something twisted. I should have been celebrating, but all I could think was, what happens to me when she leaves? I told myself I was fine staying behind. College had never been my dream. I liked working with my hands, fixing things, feeling the weight of an honest day's labor. While Stella chased books and ideas, I worked at the local diner, saving what little I could. My path seemed simple, even small, compared to hers. The day she boarded the bus to Boston, I stood on the cracked pavement of the station, pretending to smile. She waved through the window, eyes wet with both excitement and fear. "Promise you'll call me every day, Harper," she shouted. I raised a hand. "Promise. Just don't forget me when you're famous." When the bus rolled away, I turned my face so she wouldn't see the tears I couldn't hold back. Our lives split into two stories then. Stella called me every week, her voice bubbling with descriptions of Boston, the Charles River glittering at sunset, the endless libraries, the friends who shared her love for literature and debate. She sounded alive in a way I had never heard before. Meanwhile, I stayed in Michigan, clocking shifts at the diner, later picking up work at a local garage. My hands were always greasy, my nails broken, my back sore, but at least it was honest. Still, whenever I heard her voice on the phone, that old ache returned. I wasn't jealous. Not exactly. It was more like a fear. Fear that distance and success would carry Stella into a life where I no longer fit. Fear that one day, my sister, the other half of my soul, would stop needing me. I didn't know then that fate had much darker ways of pulling us apart. It was during her second year in Boston that Stella first told me about Richard. I still remember her voice over the phone, soft, almost embarrassed, like she was sharing a secret she wasn't sure she should. "He's different, Harper," she said. "He doesn't look at me like I'm some charity case or a project. He listens." I teased her at first, warning her not to get distracted from her studies. But when I finally met Richard, I understood. He was tall, well-dressed, with kind eyes that didn't flinch when he shook my hand, even though it was still smudged with motor oil from the garage. He came from a wealthy family on the East Coast, yet he never made Stella feel small. In fact, he seemed genuinely fascinated by the way she talked about books, her dreams, and even our messy childhood. Their love grew quickly, blossoming into something I could see was real. After graduation, when Richard proposed, Stella's voice cracked with joy as she called me. "Harper," he asked, and I said yes. The wedding felt like a fairy tale I didn't belong to. It was held at his family's seaside estate, where the air smelled of salt and money. I wore a borrowed dress that didn't quite fit, and I kept tugging at the hem as though it might suddenly betray me. But then, Stella walked down the aisle in her gown, radiant, and all I saw was my sister's happiness. She leaned close before the ceremony started and whispered, "You're all I need, Harper. Promise you'll never leave me." "I promise," I said, and meant it. For a few years, it seemed as though Stella had finally been given the life she deserved. She and Richard traveled, sent me photos of them smiling on yachts and in sunlit gardens. Their laughter floated through the phone line every time she called. I told myself it was enough to hear her happiness, even if I was still in our crumbling hometown. But then came the news I never expected. Richard was sick, some rare genetic disease the doctors could barely name, let alone cure. Stella's voice was trembling when she told me, as though she thought speaking it aloud might make it real. I dropped everything and took the first bus east. When I arrived, Richard was already frail, but he smiled at me as if I were family. "Thank you for coming," he whispered. "Take care of her for me." A month later, he was gone. The mansion by the sea became a tomb of silence. Stella wandered its vast rooms like a ghost, clutching his shirts, staring out at the waves. I stayed as long as I could, cooking for her, holding her when she cried herself to sleep. She tried to be strong, but I could feel her breaking. Then came the lawyer, the will, and the shocking reality. Richard had left Stella everything. Millions in bank accounts, the mansion, the yacht, shares in his family's businesses. Stella looked at me with haunted eyes. "I don't want any of it," she whispered. "I just want him back." But money doesn't care about grief, and neither did our parents. News travels fast in small towns, especially when it involves money. Within weeks of Richard's funeral, our parents, people who had barely called Stella during her college years, suddenly discovered their lost daughter again. It started with a phone call to me. "Harper, sweetheart," my mother cooed, her voice dripping with sugar that tasted like poison. "How's Stella holding up? We're so worried about her." I nearly dropped the receiver. Worried? These were the same people who used to complain that Stella was a burden, who told us we ate too much, cost too much. I swallowed my bitterness and muttered something polite, but Mom didn't stop. "She's all alone now, poor thing. And with all that inheritance, she must feel overwhelmed. Don't you think it would help if she shared a little with her family? We've always struggled, you know." My chest burned. I wanted to scream. "You never cared about us when we needed you. Why now?" But I bit my tongue and ended the call. The next day, Stella phoned me, her voice uncertain. "Dad called. He said he wants to fix up the old house, maybe pay off some debts. He asked if I could help." I could hear the conflict in her tone, the part of her that still longed for parental love. "Stella," I said firmly, "it's your money. If you want to help, fine. But don't let them guilt you into it." Of course, Stella's heart was too soft. Within a week, she wired them enough to renovate the house and wipe away every bill. She told me proudly, as though she'd done the right thing, and maybe she had, in her own eyes. But I knew my parents. Greed is never satisfied. Soon the requests multiplied. Medical bills, a new car, even vague hints about family vacations we never got to have. Every time Stella answered the phone, her voice grew shakier. "Harper, they're our parents. I just want them to be happy." I clenched my fists. "They're using you. Happiness isn't what they're after, it's control." The worst came one night when she called me sobbing. "Mom and Dad want me to transfer part of Richard's property into their names. They say it's about honoring family, about filial duty." My blood boiled. Filial duty? Where was their duty when we were starving as kids? When we cried ourselves to sleep? "Stella, don't you dare sign anything." And she sniffled on the line. "I don't want them to hate me." "They don't hate you. They just see dollar signs when they look at you." I tried to be strong for her, but fear gnawed at me. Because if I knew one thing about our parents, it was this. Once their claws sank into something, they would never let go. And now, they weren't just circling her fortune, they were circling her life. It was my parents' idea. "Family healing," Mom said sweetly over the phone, as if the word family hadn't been a weapon in her mouth for decades. "Stella has that beautiful yacht Richard left her, doesn't she? Why not take a trip together? Sail for a few days. It will help her relax, mend the bonds we've all neglected." I should have laughed in her face. Instead, I hesitated. Stella was on the other line, excited in a way I hadn't heard since before Richard got sick. "Maybe it wouldn't be so bad," she said, almost shyly. "We could spend time together, Harper. Like when we were kids." Her hope was a fragile flame. I didn't have the heart to snuff it out. The planning was suspiciously quick. Dad handled the crew, said he'd already found the perfect people. They were strangers, but he insisted they were professionals. Mom fussed over details, asking Stella about menus and entertainment, her voice unnervingly cheerful. Then, the night before departure, my phone rang again. "Harper," Mom said breathlessly, "your father's not well. Pneumonia maybe. We can't possibly go, but don't you cancel on Stella. She needs this. Promise me you'll take care of her." My stomach dropped. "Now? He's sick now?" "Yes, but don't worry about us," she urged. "Go enjoy yourself. Make memories. We'll join next time." The line went dead, leaving only the hollow echo of my dread. The next morning, Stella met me at the marina in Cape Cod. She was dressed in white linen, her hair loose in the sea breeze, smiling like she hadn't in months. "Isn't she beautiful?" she asked, gesturing to the yacht, a gleaming palace of polished wood and glass. I forced a smile, but unease gnawed at me. The crew consisted of 3 men, a grizzled captain, a technician with nervous eyes, and a young deckhand. They were polite, efficient, but something about the way they avoided eye contact unsettled me. We set sail under a sky so blue it felt like a lie. Stella leaned against the railing, hair whipping in the wind, laughing as she called back to me, "Remember when we used to swim in the river? This is better, right?" I laughed with her, but inside, my chest was tight. The first day passed in peace. We lounged on the deck, sipped juice, reminisced. For a moment, I let myself believe maybe I was wrong, maybe my parents' motives weren't sinister, but on the second day, the sky shifted. Clouds rolled in, thick and gray, dragging the horizon into shadow. The captain reassured us, "Just a small storm. We'll steer around it." That night, I couldn't sleep. The yacht creaked in the rising wind, and the radio flickered with static. I checked the satellite phone, no signal. The technician muttered something about weather interference, but his trembling hands told me otherwise. By dawn, the sea had become a monster. Waves towered, slamming against the hull. Stella clutched my hand, her face pale. "Harper, I'm scared." "I've got you," I whispered, dragging her into the cabin. "Stay low. I won't let go." The captain shouted orders, the crew scrambling. Then came the sound that ripped through my bones, a violent explosion below deck. Smoke billowed from the engine room. "The engine's gone!" the technician screamed. The yacht lurched violently, water pouring across the deck. I shoved a life jacket onto Stella, shouting above the roar of the storm. "If we capsize, hold on to me. Don't let go." She nodded, tears streaming, clinging to my arm as the vessel groaned like a dying animal. And then it happened. A wave, massive and merciless, struck us broadside. The yacht flipped like a child's toy, throwing us into the icy abyss. Salt water swallowed me whole. My lungs burned, my ears roared. I fought to the surface, gasping, screaming Stella's name. "Stella! Stella!" Debris floated all around me, broken planks, twisted railings, a lone chair bobbing like a coffin. I kicked furiously, searching, but she was gone. Another wave slammed into me, dragging me under. Darkness pressed in. Somehow, I clawed my way back to the surface, clinging to a shattered piece of wood. My strength was nearly gone, but my voice broke the storm one last time. "Stella?" No answer. Only the sea, endless and cruel. Hours blurred. Cold seeped into my bones. My teeth chattered, my body heavy as stone. Just when I thought the ocean would claim me too, a distant light pierced the horizon. A Coast Guard boat. Rough hands pulled me aboard, voices shouting words I couldn't hear. I collapsed on the deck, coughing seawater, my mind spinning with one question that drowned out everything else. Where was Stella? The hospital walls smelled of antiseptic and despair. After the Coast Guard dragged me from the storm, I spent 2 days there, wrapped in blankets, fighting chills that came less from the cold and more from the horror in my chest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Stella's hand slipping from mine, her face swallowed by the waves. When my parents arrived, I thought for a second they might finally show something real. But the moment they walked in, I knew better. Their eyes flicked around the room, searching, calculating. "Harper," Mom said softly, gripping my hand. "We're devastated. Tell us again. You're certain you didn't see Stella?" I froze. The way she asked it wasn't grief. It was confirmation. Dad's gaze cut through me like a blade. "The Coast Guard said they haven't found her. Maybe she's gone." His pause was deliberate, almost satisfied. My heart clenched. They weren't mourning their daughter. They were verifying their payday. Days later, the phone rang. A Coast Guard officer's voice came heavy with sorrow. "Miss Newman, we've recovered a body near the wreck site. Female, decomposed, time of death consistent with the storm. We believe it may be your sister." The words shredded what little hope I had left. I collapsed on the floor, hands tangled in my hair, whispering, "No, no, no." The autopsy could not confirm with certainty it was too damaged, but our parents pushed hard for a funeral anyway. "We need closure," Mom insisted, crocodile tears streaming. I knew what she wanted wasn't closure. It was paperwork. The funeral was held on a day the sky seemed to conspire against us. Rain poured relentlessly, flattening the grass in the cemetery. Black umbrellas dotted the field like crows. The coffin was white, chosen by me because Stella once said she wanted her wedding dress to be that color, pure and hopeful. I stood beside it, soaked through, numb. Friends from Boston whispered condolences I barely heard. I saw Stella's photos lined up on the altar, her laughing by the Charles River, her hand on Richard's shoulder, her eyes filled with light. Each one stabbed me with guilt. Then I noticed my parents, dressed impeccably, whispering not to each other but to a man in a suit I didn't recognize. I caught fragments of words: estate, inheritance, transfer. My stomach twisted. Even here, at her supposed grave, money was their language. I stormed toward them. "What are you doing? This is Stella's funeral." Mom's eyes narrowed, her voice low. "Don't make a scene, Harper. We're just discussing the future." I wanted to scream, to rip away the mask they wore, but my voice broke into silence. Instead, I turned back to the coffin, hands trembling. As the priest murmured prayers, the sound of dirt hitting the lid filled the air, final and merciless. My throat closed. "Stella," I whispered under my breath. "I'm sorry. I couldn't save you." And then my phone buzzed. I pulled it out, shielding it from the rain. A message from an unknown number. "I'm alive. That's not me in the casket." The world tilted. My heart stuttered. My legs buckled. My hands shook so violently I almost dropped the phone into the mud. I typed back with trembling fingers. "Who are you?" The reply came instantly. "Can't say. They're watching. Don't trust our parents." My breath caught. I looked around the cemetery, eyes darting. Everyone's face blurred through the rain, but suddenly they all felt like threats. My parents were still whispering with the man in the suit, oblivious to my panic. Was it possible? Could Stella be alive? If so, then who was in that coffin? And if she was alive, what did she mean by "don't trust our parents"? I shoved the phone into my pocket, forcing my face blank. No one could know. Not yet. As the last shovelful of dirt covered the coffin, I stood in the downpour, heart hammering against my ribs. Grief had twisted into terror, then into something sharper: resolve. If Stella was alive, I would find her. And if my parents had orchestrated this nightmare, I would uncover every rotten piece of it. The message haunted me all night. I sat in a cheap motel room with the curtains drawn, staring at the glowing screen as if willing it to speak again. "I'm alive. Don't trust our parents." My heart told me it had to be Stella. My mind screamed it was a cruel trick. The next evening, another buzz jolted me upright. A new message. "Meet me at Truro Beach. The cabin by the lighthouse. 9 p.m. Come alone." I hesitated only a moment. If there was even the slightest chance Stella was alive, nothing could keep me away. The drive was a blur of rain-slick roads and pounding heartbeat. Truro Beach was deserted, waves crashing against jagged rocks under the faint glow of the lighthouse. I spotted the cabin, small, wooden, leaning against the dunes like it had secrets buried in its walls. A single dim light flickered through the window. I knocked once. The door creaked open, and there she was. "Harper," she whispered, before throwing herself into my arms. Thin, damp, trembling but alive. My knees nearly gave out. I held her as tightly as I could, my tears mixing with hers. "I thought you were gone," I choked. "I almost was," she murmured, pulling me inside quickly and bolting the door. "A fisherman found me clinging to wreckage. He brought me here. I begged him not to tell anyone, not even the Coast Guard. I had to hide." I stared at her, my mind spinning. Why? Why hide from me? From everyone? Her eyes, hollow with exhaustion, flashed with fear. "Because I think Mom and Dad wanted me dead. The yacht, the crew, everything was arranged by them. And the night before, they backed out suddenly. Doesn't that seem like more than coincidence?" Her words punched the air from my lungs. I thought back to Mom's syrupy insistence that I still take Stella on the trip even though Dad was sick, the too eager way they'd pushed her to go. "They wanted your money," I whispered. Stella nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. I didn't want to believe it, but I saw their eyes. Harper. The moment Richard's will was read, I knew one day they'd come for me. "That's why—" She hesitated, then pulled a folded document from her bag. "I made a secret will. If anything happened to me, everything goes to you. And if something happens to us both, it all goes to charity." I never told them, not a soul, until now. I stared at her, torn between pride and fear. "You were protecting me. But Stella, if they find out you're alive, they'll try again." Her hand gripped mine, trembling but determined. Then we need proof. We need to expose them before they destroy us both. I looked at her, my twin, the other half of me I thought I'd buried. She was alive, but so was the danger. That night, as the storm outside battered the cabin walls, we made a vow. Together, we would bring our parents down. The plan took weeks, but every second felt like standing on a fault line ready to split. Stella stayed hidden with the fishermen, while I gathered proof. A dockworker confessed he'd seen a stranger sneaking onto the yacht the night before it sank. Later, I confronted that man in a rusted-out bar on the outskirts of town, his voice shaking as he admitted he'd been paid $50,000 to tamper with the engines and radio. Paid by my parents. The final nail came from an insurance agent, a friend of mine, who confirmed what I feared most. Mom and Dad had taken out a massive policy on the yacht days before the trip. By the time the estate hearing arrived in Cape Cod, I was armed. But evidence alone wasn't enough. Stella wanted to face them. Alive. The courthouse was small but crowded, buzzing with relatives, bankers, lawyers, vultures circling a fortune. My parents sat in the front row, dressed in black as though mourning, but their eyes were sharp, calculating. Mom leaned toward Dad, whispering with a smile as if everything was already theirs. When the judge asked if there were any objections or new information, I stood. My knees shook, but my voice was steady. Your Honor, my sister is not dead. She was the victim of a planned attempt on her life, an attempt orchestrated by our own parents. And the room erupted in gasps. My parents spun around, their faces draining of color. Lies, Mom hissed. Our daughter drowned. I reached into my bag and handed a USB to the court officer. The recording of the saboteur's confession echoed through the chamber. They paid me $50,000 to make it look like an accident. No, Dad barked, but his voice cracked. And here, I said, slamming down the insurance policy, is proof you insured the yacht days before the trip, with a payout in the millions if Stella vanished. The judge's eyes narrowed. This is damning evidence, Mr. and Mrs. Newman. But what of your daughter? The door opened, and Stella walked in. Gasps ricocheted through the room as she stepped forward, thin, pale, but unbroken. My mother's scream split the silence, but it wasn't joy. It was fear. Your Honor, Stella said, her voice trembling but clear. I am alive, and my parents tried to kill me. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Mom sobbed theatrically. Dad shouted denials, but no one believed them. The judge's gavel cracked against the desk. These allegations will proceed to criminal investigation. Until then, custody of the estate remains with Miss Stella Newman. I reached for her hand. She squeezed mine back, her eyes shining with tears. We had done it. Our parents, once the people who should have loved us most, were let out, pale and shaken, their empire of greed collapsing. And Stella and I stood together, side by side, exactly where we'd promised to be since childhood. No matter what storms came, we would face them, together.